Hello. Thank you for joining me today. Let me just pull up my slide. Today, I'm going to be presenting a brief introduction to trauma. My name is Louise. I'm one of the school social workers talking about trauma. I'll give a little bit of background into social work, our role in the school, and then kind of jump into a very, very general overview of trauma. But before I want to begin, I want to respectfully acknowledge the land we teach, learn, and grow together on Treaty 6 territory and homeland of the Métis. We honor and respect the history, languages, ceremonies, and cultures of the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people who have called this land home for countless generations. We recognize the Cree, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Métis, Dene, and Nakota Sioux and Inuit for their care, love, and stewardship of this place. We are grateful for those who share their knowledge with us and help to foster a respectful relationship with all of our relatives on this land. We are committed to understanding the harms done in the name of education and continuing to learn to honor the true spirit of Treaty 6 as a promise of friendship, collaboration, and peaceful alliance. So I wanted to start by going over a bit about social work, what it is, and more specifically my role as a school social worker. So social workers believe that people are resourceful, resilient, and able. We work in a variety of settings and help people attain physical, mental, and spiritual well-being. We also address broad social issues like oppression, discrimination, domestic violence, unemployment, and poverty. So social work is an extremely broad field. We work as counselors in the community, in healthcare, in research, policy development, and much, much more. We can work in many different locations and many different capacities. So we can work in hospitals, libraries, schools, mental health clinics, family courts, child welfare settings, advocacy organizations, and so many other places. So my role specifically as one of the Sturgeon school social workers is being a supportive role for families and kind of bridging that connection between school and home. So we do a lot of information gathering, so conducting interviews, we might do a home visit, having school meetings, things like that. Assessments and intervention, so evaluate and gathering information to identify issues, risks, and the needs of families. We provide family support, so guidance, problem-solving strategies, and intervention plans for families in crisis. We can connect you to other referrals and other agencies. We do a lot of school collaboration, so assisting schools and supporting families and students, offering feedback and that connection. We relationship build with families, but also with community organizations, and we stay informed about all of the services in the areas. We advocate and coordinate necessary services for families. We provide mental health and wellness, so we collaborate with school-based counselors and the mental health wellness coaches to implement plans and interventions. We collaborate with lots of other community members and in other regions, and we're also part of the crisis response team. So that was a little bit about my role and social work. And now I just want to preface this presentation with a reminder for self-care. So this presentation is a very general overview of trauma and its impacts, but this can still be triggering for some people. So if at any point you need to step away or leave, please do. So I want to start by talking about the definition of trauma. So trauma is an exposure to an extraordinary experience that presents a physical or physiological threat to oneself or others. It generates a reaction of helplessness and fear. And trauma is ultimately the sum of the event, the experience of the event, and the effect the event has had on someone's life. So when we talk about trauma, it can typically be broken down into three types. There's acute, chronic, or complex. So acute trauma results from a single distressing event. So things like a car accident or a natural disaster. These events are usually intense, but short-lived. Chronic trauma occurs due to prolonged or repeated distressing events. So events like bullying, ongoing bullying, or abuse. And these events have long-lasting effects on mental health. Complex trauma involves exposure to multiple traumatic events, often invasive and interpersonal in nature. So again, like child abuse, and these complex traumas affect many aspects of a person's life and development. So again, acute trauma are those single events like car accidents, natural disasters, house fires, things like that. Chronic trauma are those repeated exposures like abuse, neglect, racism, exposure to violence, war, community conflict, things like that. And complex trauma refers to the exposure to multiple traumatic events, often of an invasive and interpersonal nature, and the effects of this exposure, along with the difficulties that arise from adapting to or surviving these experiences. So complex trauma typically involves repeated harm over a period of time. So the key differences between complex trauma and acute and chronic is that complex trauma is a term that describes both the traumatic events themselves and a person's response to that trauma. So complex trauma often overlaps with co-occurring disorders and stressors. So for example, if we have a person who grew up in a household with continuous physical and emotional abuse from their parents, as a child, they might feel unsafe and unsupported and struggle with fear and worthlessness. And then when they move on to adolescence, they might have a difficulty time forming healthy relationships and regulating their emotions. And then as they move into adulthood, the trauma affects their ability to maintain employment and relationships, causing anxiety, flashbacks, and nightmares. So the multiple invasive traumatic events deeply affected their emotional, physiological, and social functioning and development. And I will, it is important to understand that no type of trauma is inherently worse than others. Each type can have a significant and unique impact on an individual's life, and all types of trauma deserve attention and care. But understanding these types of traumas is crucial for providing appropriate and support and care for those affected. So trauma can have significant impacts on both physical and mental health. Impacts of any kind of trauma might include headaches, struggles eating, anxiety, depression, sleeping disorders, frequent illnesses, chest pains, chronic pain, PTSD, things like that. So they can manifest physically and through mental health as well. Trauma can also have impacts on behaviors, emotions, and relationships. So that might look like poor impulse control, excessive worrying, shame, and guilt, having limited coping skills, difficulty controlling emotions, risk-taking, attachment struggles, being socially withdrawn, so things like that. Trauma can also have effects on cognition and brain development. So impacts might present as impaired readiness to learn, difficulty problem solving, slower processing, speech delays, and impaired stress response. So that fight, flight, or freeze response can be impaired as well. So in regards to trauma and the developing brain, extended exposure to traumatic events and stress can lead to functional changes in several parts of the brain. So there's the amygdala, which is the emotional regulation center, the hippocampus, which is memory, and the prefrontal cortex, which is kind of the higher order thinking or executive functioning. So when our stress response is triggered repeatedly over a prolonged period of time, for example, when a child has experienced abuse or neglect, it physically alters the brain, leaving certain parts rewired, adapting to surviving danger. The amygdala, that emotional regulation center of a child living with trauma, is likely to be in overdrive, constantly signaling danger and releasing cortisol and priming them for their fight, flight, freeze responses. This can leave the child feeling unsafe, fearful, irritated, and extremely sensitive to small everyday things, such as a slightly raised voice or, moving classrooms. They may feel numb or not in contact with the here and now. So as well as causing elevated stress responses, trauma can also change the way the prefrontal cortex, so that thinking center of the brain, functions. This can make it more difficult to concentrate, make decisions, and process new information. Studies have shown that trauma can impact the hippocampus, so that memory center. So traumatic memories may replay in a child's mind and seem like the threat is current, even if the memory happened in the past and that the child is safe. Triggers for these memories could be anything from a sound, smell, environment, or situation to an image, movement, facial expression, or touch. This image illustrates the impact of trauma on brain development in children. It visually represents how repeated traumatic experiences can alter brain structure and function, affecting those areas responsible for the emotional regulation, memory, and stress response. It shows how trauma causes the brain to adapt and to survive. So rather than, typical development having more time for cognition, social, emotional, and regulation, when a brain is exposed to trauma in development, there's more resources spent on survival. So trauma in preschool age children can result from, many distressing events. Even at a young age, trauma can significantly affect a child's development and behavior. Trauma presents very differently in everybody, but signs to look out for would be increased aggression, withdrawal, and clinginess. They might show excessive fear, anxiety, or sadness. Trauma can manifest as, stomach aches or headaches or changes in sleep patterns. So with preschool aged kiddos, it's really important to create a safe environment, ensuring the child feels safe and secure. So, having that consistent routine, providing stability and a predictable daily routine, offering comfort, reassurance, and validating feelings, as well as seeking support from counselors or social workers or support when needed. To further understand the impact of trauma on development in the brain, I'm just going to play this video.
Brain development is much more than a story about biology. From the earliest years, relationships with others play a key role in shaping how our brain grows and develops. Early relationships, where there is abuse and neglect, have a long-term impact on children. A brain that has adapted to survive in a threatening or unpredictable world may not work so well in an ordinary environment. This can create what is called latent vulnerability, where early abusive or neglectful experiences with carers put children at greater risk of experiencing mental health problems in the future. For these children, compared to their peers, common experiences like moving to a new school can feel more daunting and stressful. New faces can appear threatening, while positive social cues can be missed. It can be harder to negotiate new social situations and learn to trust new people. Even fun experiences like joining a new sports team can be challenging. Too much focus on potential threat cues can mean missing out on positive social cues such as a playful nudge. Or it causes an overreaction, which leads to an increased risk of conflict and sometimes violence. These reactions can increase the likelihood of generating new stressful events. It's harder to deal with everyday challenges when you feel unconfident and anxious inside, and harder to build and maintain relationships. Over time, this can mean a child loses friends and the support of adults, and so misses out on opportunities to grow and develop. This social thinning can increase the risk of mental health problems in the future. Neuroscience research is beginning to shed new light on how vulnerability unfolds over a child's life. All children need care and stimulation from adults who value them and who show them attention and love. These experiences shape a child's brain development. When children face traumatic experiences like abuse and neglect, their brain adapts to help them cope. We know of changes in 3 different brain systems: the reward, memory, and threat systems. Experiences of domestic violence or physical abuse can lead to hypervigilance, where the brain reacts more to threat. This might help a child stay safe in an early adverse environment, but it can cause problems in more ordinary environments. Hypervigilance can best be understood as a pattern of adaptation rather than a sign of damage. Abuse and neglect can also mean a world where a child's basic needs for care and attention are not met. This can shape the brain's reward system, the part of the brain that helps us learn about positive aspects of our environment and motivates our behaviour. Over time, the brain's reward system can learn to respond differently to things like positive social cues. Neuroscience studies have also pointed to changes in the autobiographical memory system, our memory of everyday past experiences. Following trauma, negative memories appear to become more salient, which means they become more prominent than positive ones. And everyday memories can also become less detailed. This is a problem because we need to draw on past experiences to help us deal with new social situations. Neuroscience research is showing how childhood trauma can create latent vulnerability, increasing the risk of later mental health problems like anxiety and depression. This vulnerability is not just located in the child, but arises through their relationships. Helping children who have experienced trauma still requires ordinary boundaries and consequences, but it also requires us to step back and reflect and see behaviour that we find challenging in a different light. A child may simply be doing their best to survive now, with brain adaptations from the past. We know a child's brain has the capacity to continue to adapt. For this to happen, they need our help to build and maintain trusted relationships, manage everyday stresses, and prevent new ones from happening. We need to encourage them to try again and believe things can be different. This is far from an easy task and takes time. Science is helping reframe our understanding of childhood trauma. Seeing children's behaviour in a new light can mean we respond differently. But there is much still to learn. Working together, we can develop more effective approaches that promote resilience and recovery. We can help children build trusting relationships and create opportunities for their brains to adapt in new ways.
Ah, okay, so the next area I want to explore is the fight, flight, or freeze response. So the fight, flight, freeze response is a natural reaction to perceived threats where the body prepares to either confront the danger, escape from it, or become immobile. So in kiddos, the response can manifest in various ways, such as aggressive behavior. So that would be your fight response, avoidance or running away, your flight response, or becoming very still and unresponsive. So that freeze response. So a child might become aggressive or throw tantrums. They might try to run, hide away from situations that remind them of a trauma, or a child might become very quiet, withdrawn, and appear to be in a daze. So understanding the fight, flight, or freeze response better helps us to support anyone dealing with trauma. And by recognizing these reactions, we can provide the appropriate care to help them feel safe. So with the fight, fright, freeze response, there are a number of areas in your brain that are activated. So the prefrontal cortex, so again, your thinking brain that's helping you regulate emotion, your cerebral cortex, so the higher functioning, so personality, decision making, things like that, and your limbic system or your survival system. And so to further understand this response, I'm going to play a video that talks about Dr. Dan Siegel's hand model of the brain. Dr. Dan Siegel is a psychiatrist, educator, and author. He's known for his work in interpersonal neurobiology, which explores how relationships and the brain interact to shape our mental health and development. He created a hand model of the brain to help understand how the brain responds to trauma and stress. So the picture on the last slide was an image of his hand model, and this video we'll talk a little bit more about it.
Let's take a look at Dr. Dan Siegel's hand-brain model, brought to you by the Center for Child Counseling.
How does your brain respond under stress? We're going to build brains today and explore that response. The more that we understand how the brain works, the better we'll understand that response as well as mitigate the effects of it. Before we explore what each region of the brain is responsible for, it's important to remember that the brain developed from the bottom up and the inside out. This same process is also followed when our brain makes sense of new information. It travels from the bottom up and inside the brain to the outermost regions, meaning the outer and upper regions of the brain are the last to develop in life. For example, that prefrontal cortex only develops fully at the age of 25.
We're going to use our hand to create a visual of what the brain looks like and how it processes information. Your wrist is the spinal cord, which travels from the spine to the base of your skull. The base of your palm is the brainstem. The brainstem regulates the basic functions of our body, like breathing, heart rate, body temperature, and digestion. Basically, all those things that we don't need to sit around and think about in order to keep us alive. It's known as the reptilian brain, as it's the most primitive and primary function is survival and arousal. For example, if we're hungry or not, or where we are between the stages of being awake and asleep. Your thumb is the amygdala. Fold your thumb into the palm of your hand and you'll form the limbic system. The limbic system is responsible for our emotions, memories, and activating our survival response, that fight, flight, and freeze system. This is known as the mammalian brain. It works closely with the brainstem and the body to create not only our basic drives, but also our emotions. More specifically, the amygdala is responsible for detecting threats to our well-being, and it sends a signal to our brain, hormones, and body to keep us safe. Is this good or is this bad is the most basic question that the limbic system addresses and responds to. Your fingers form the cerebral cortex, and the tips of your fingers are your prefrontal cortex. If you close your fingers over your thumb to form a loose fist, you've just created your brain. The cortex, which is the outer layer of our brain, is our thinking brain. It's the part that allows us to imagine, create, problem solve, as well as understand abstract concepts. The prefrontal cortex in particular helps us evaluate the situation that the amygdala signaled as a threat, and it controls our emotional response before our feelings escalate to the point where we can't control them. That prefrontal cortex is the region that only develops at the age of 25. It's responsible for our executive functioning, things like controlling short-sighted, reflective behaviors, and it allows us to do things like planning, decision-making, problem-solving, self-control, setting short-term goals for long-term outcomes. This is the area of our brain that really focuses our attention, anticipates consequences for our actions, manages our emotional reactions, and plays a huge role in our ability to put our thoughts and feelings into words.
These fold over the limbic system to create your brain. This would be the front and this the back, where that spinal cord runs down the spine. As clever as our brains and bodies are, they use a sort of standard approach to all stress. The best way to think about this is that our brains and bodies are designed for survival, and so it interprets stress as a threat to our well-being. This means that if it's a bear coming towards us in the woods, or an upcoming deadline, our brain responds in the exact same way. The amygdala detects the threat and signals the brain and body to release those hormones for fight, flight, and freeze. What that does is pulls resources down to that survival part of the brain and flips the lid to switch off the unnecessary prefrontal cortex and cerebral cortex, as those resources aren't needed for survival. So now we're thinking from that survival-based reactive region, and that executive functioning that lies in that prefrontal cortex region has been temporarily turned offline. This means our executive functioning is hindered for that moment. So things like learning abilities, problem solving, planning, and decision making aren't going to be as effective as usual when our lid has flipped. So how do we get that lid back down? How do we get that prefrontal cortex back online? Well, to return that lid, we need to regulate. And this is done through the use of coping skills and social supports. By putting into practice techniques to calm down or connect with others who are safe and calming, we're providing our brains and bodies with evidence that there's no further need to feel threatened. The more we practice these techniques, especially when we're feeling regulated and our brain is fully online, the more effective they are in moments of need.
Okay, so the next area, kind of along those same lines, is the window of tolerance. So this is also a concept developed by Dr. Dan Siegel, and it describes the optimal zone where a person can function effectively and manage their emotion. So kind of that zone where we're not flipping our lid. So when a person is within their window of tolerance, they can handle stress and challenges without becoming overwhelmed. However, trauma can narrow this window, making it easier for someone to be pushed into hyperarousal. So that's your fight or flight. You're feeling extremely anxious, angry, out of control, overwhelmed, and you might want to fight or run away. Or we can be pushed into hypoarousal, which is the freeze, or when you feel extremely zoned out, numb, both emotionally and physically. You're losing track of time. It feels like your body is just taking over. These are two images that show the window of tolerance. So again, the window of tolerance is the time when we can handle things. So our optimal zone, the state where a person feels calm, alert, able to handle everyday challenges. Within this window, individuals can think clearly, make decisions, and regulate emotions. So, I'm calm enough to learn. You feel like you can deal with whatever's happening in your life. But when we become overwhelmed, we can be pushed into hyperarousal or hypoarousal. And again, the hyperarousal is when a person is pushed outside of their window. They may experience intense emotions like anxiety, panic, anger. Again, the hyperarousal is that fight or flight response. And then conversely, if a person falls below their window of tolerance into hypoarousal, they may feel numb, disconnected, shut down, or that freeze response. And so trauma can shrink the window of tolerance by overwhelming the nervous system, making it harder for individuals to manage stress and emotions. And when the window of tolerance is smaller, we can more easily slip into the hyper or hypoarousal states. So kind of along the same lines as the window of tolerance is the stress cycle. So when we're pushed out of our window of tolerance, we try to return to our optimal zone or to our window of tolerance. So like she was saying in the video, we flip our lid and then we have to regulate to come back. So to return to that window of tolerance, to regulate, we have to complete the stress cycle. As our goal is to return to that optimal zone where we can function effectively and manage our emotions. So completing the stress cycle is essential for this process. So by moving through the stages of the stress cycle, we can process and release the stress in our bodies, and then which helps us to return and maintain our window of tolerance. This ensures we can handle future stressors more effectively and keep our emotional and physiological balance in check. So the stress cycle starts with this alarm phase. So there's the beginning when the threat is perceived, and then there's the alarm phase, which is the initial reaction to a stressor. So the body's fight, fright, or freeze response is activated, leading to changes such as increased heart rate, rapid breathing, heightened alertness. Then we move to the resistance stage. So after the initial shock, the body attempts to return to a state of balance while still remaining alert. So stress hormones like cortisol are released to help cope with the stressor. If the stress continues, the body remains in that heightened state of readiness. And then we would move to a neutral state and then begin the cycle again as things come up. But there is also the exhaustion stage. So if stress persists without resolution, so if we're not able to regulate, the body's resources become depleted, leading to exhaustion. And prolonged exposure to stress can result in physical and mental health concerns like heart disease, depression, anxiety, things like that. So to effectively manage stress and return to your window of tolerance, it's really important to complete that stress cycle. So moving through those stages and returning back to a neutral state or balance. And this is just some examples of techniques that might help someone complete the stress cycle. So, having a good laugh, getting creative, going for a walk, run, moving your body, just really releasing, all those energies to kind of return back to a state. And so the last area that I wanted to touch on briefly is attachment. Attachment is a crucial concept in understanding how children respond to trauma and stress, attachment is their ability to form secure relationships and regulate emotions. So attachment is the deep and enduring emotional bond that connects one person to another. This bond is crucial for a child's development, providing a sense of security and a foundation for them exploring their world. So there are a few types of attachment. There's secure attachment, which is when children feel safe and confident that their caregivers will meet their needs. They are comfortable exploring their environments and seeking comfort from their caregivers when needed. There's avoidant attachment. So children tend to avoid or ignore their caregivers. They show little emotion when separated or reunited. They may appear independent, but often suppress their need for closeness. There's ambivalent or anxious attachment, where children are clingy or dependent on their caregivers, showing intense distress when separating, and show difficulty being comforted upon reunion. They may be wary of exploring their environments as well. And then there is disorganized attachment. So children would display a mix of behaviors, including confusion and apprehension towards their caregivers. So understanding these types of attachments help in recognizing how early relationships influence a child's development and their ability to cope with stress and trauma. Secure attachments help children develop trust, emotional regulation, and healthy social relationships. But when this bond is disrupted, such as through trauma, it can lead to difficulties in emotional and social development. So approaches to healing are essential because they address the multiple impacts of trauma on physical, emotional, and mental health. They prevent re-traumatization, they build resilience, and improve overall well-being. Healing strategies such as therapy, community supports, things like that enable individuals to develop coping mechanisms and recover more comprehensively. So some approaches to healing might include therapy, and that could be, talk therapy, play therapy, art therapy, or a more trauma-focused therapy, things like that. It could be, having a supportive environment, having a safe community around you, and you can lean on people when things do come up, and encouraging, skills, developing coping strategies to have a sense of control and things like that. I did want to provide a few resources that can help adults, children's families experiencing trauma. So CASA Mental Health is a not-for-profit organization providing mental health services for children, adolescents, and their families. Their mission is to build resilience through holistic, evidence-informed, and compassionate care. They offer early childhood services, so support for kiddos aged 3 to 5. They have youth services for youth aged 5 to 17, and they have family support, community outreach, and more intensive programs. If that's what the family needs. Psychology Today is a widely recognized resource for mental health information. It offers articles, news, and directories to help individuals find therapists or other mental health professionals. So on the Psychology Today website, there is a therapy directory, and you can search for therapists according to the challenges you face or the type of therapy you're interested in. And you can filter the searches, in your area based on what kind of therapy you want or what you're looking for, and it'll show you all the available therapists who can provide that support. Alberta Health Services does have a range of mental health programs for children, youth, and families as well. And the Kids Help Phone is, free confidential support for young people across the country. Their mission is to ensure that every young person has access to help wherever they might need it. They offer crisis support, so that immediate assistance through text, phone, online chat with trained crisis responders. They do have counseling for more in-depth support. They have mental health resources and tools for young people. They have peer support, so forums and communities online where people can connect and share their experiences. And this is all available on their website, just Kids Help Phone. And my last video that I have to show you, I wanted to end by just doing a quick mini meditation to just kind of reset.
So sitting comfortably, just taking a big deep breath in through the nose, out through the mouth. As you breathe in, noticing how the body expands. As you breathe out, just watching the body soften as you gently close the eyes. And rather than the mind leading the breath, allow the breath to lead the mind. Notice the sensation of the breath. Notice it where you feel it in the body. If you need to, you can just gently place your hand on the stomach. And just following that rising and falling sensation. Nothing else to do. Allowing thoughts to come and go. And when you're ready, just gently opening the eyes again.
Okay, so thank you for listening. And if anyone has any questions, you can type them in the chat or turn on your mic. Okay, if nobody has any questions, then I will leave you with just a reminder to practice self-care. Thanks so much.